Hi, business people. Professor Peter Gregory here. I want to give you a video in order for you to get into the Mod4 creating your Excel analysis sheets where you're going to be calculating profitability and schedule. I want to take it from a clean sheet, was what you're probably going to be starting with. Now, we went over this in Monday's class, but I want to give a demo on here. I'm going to try to keep the narration to a minimum and just note when I'm doing certain things for what reason. What I have open here, as you would have open on your computer, is an Excel sheet that you're going to be using for the rest of the term here in analyzing, especially Mod 4. This is going to go into your report, but it mainly is going to be able to help you reveal strategy within Mod 4 that you're going to need to really succeed. Okay, so we're starting with a blank sheet of Excel as I recommend you have up on your desk, and I Alt-Tab on my PC over to Mod 4, which is running, and I haven't done anything in here except punch through. I just actually clicked 47 times, 46, 47 times to get myself through all the startup window, the tutorial part of this, to be able to get to this point. So once you get through that whole tutorial, this is what you're going to have also. The end of the tutorial says click End Turn, which I've done, and so you'll see that I'm in turn 2 of 30. We have 5 contracts that we got stuffed with. Whoever it is that walked off the job here had ordered up and gotten these contracts. They've accepted the contracts. They have some assembly of material here, and you're going to want to go into the receiving desk and look at what your delivery schedule is, because someone set this up already. And you have to calculate whether you're getting the correct material on time to get your contracts done. So don't forget, you have 7 weeks to do the t-shirts. The sport shorts are 8 weeks. The White Sox 11. Low-rise jeans 13 weeks, and Bermuda shorts, which are made from khaki, you have 15 weeks. That's a fair amount, but that's a fairly large order also. You have some big orders in here, 1,800, 1,000, and you're going to want to know whether you can get those out the door on time. Okay, so when you come into Mod 4, you actually have 4 machines on the floor. You don't know what machines all these contracts need. Okay, so you're going to have to move around the floor. You have to go up to the bidding and contract area. If you go to the research desk over here, for instance, you can look at the products. This has every single product in here. Here's the list of all cotton products and the parameters or characteristics of all the cotton products. You can click through to get to denim, khaki, nylon. As you go through this window, you'll notice what the required production tasks are, and who you're going to have occupy the production floor at that spot. You have to have enough people in production to run the machine, and you have to have the right machines. Okay. Within here, there's a little bit of prediction. Say for White Sox, it says that the demand is even across the year. All 4 seasons, these are valid for. Your dress socks, same way. T-shirts, same thing. Colored T-shirts, just to give you an example, what I'm talking about here only has spring and summer seasons there in general. Okay, that's something to keep your eye open for as you're up here, as you're planning ahead and you're taking on contracts. Okay. So as we did in class, we started the Excel sheet. Now I'm going to break this down. There's really 3 areas that you're going to have in this Excel sheet. The first part of it here is going to be a preamble with the primitive information that you're going to punch in. So this is kind of your primitives, we'll call them primitives. After you get some of the primitives in, you're going to want to put in the information to calculate some major costs. Okay, so for every contract, you want to calculate major costs in here. And then if I move over to the right, there's a whole section here. We'll put a divider in here, and you're going to have a whole section that's on schedule. And you can do this all on one sheet. I don't recommend it unless you're really handy with Excel and have your own way about it. I don't recommend going to another sheet. You'd be flipping back and forth quite a bit on that. Okay, you may even use some of the lower area down here for keeping tabs on ordering material, shipping, and some other things. But that's up to you to decide whether you need some more tools or not. I'm giving you the very basics that are going to be used in the course and will end up in your report. Okay, so I'll take that out of there. All right. So if we remember that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these 3 sections listed up here, and normally you're going to start right up here in your spreadsheet, up here in the upper left-hand corner. Okay. So usually you put a header in here, you put some lines of header that explain what this sheet is all about. You're going to end up doing screenshots for it and whatnot. But I'm going to leave these up here to keep us reminded of the three different sections that we have. So I'm going to start putting things in here without narrating because I believe you'll understand as I go along. As I need to notate, I will make comments. Minimum contracts to evaluate for financial reasons for profitability, about a dozen. I really need to see about a dozen from you, and it's at about a dozen that you're going to start understanding the trends in the contracts themselves. There's preferable and less preferable contracts out there. That's a contract value stated. $4 per garment. I believe that why we come up with those numbers. Quality. I don't know offhand. I'm just going to put in 40 for that particular contract, but you want to record that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use Alt Enter to give myself a little bit of room in that row. When you hit Alt Enter within a cell, it gives a hard enter. So I'm going to use this heading up here a little bit better. I wanted a little bit more room there. Okay, so raw material per garment, and that would be 2, and the material. One of our first formulas here. You need the total raw materials required. That's going to be equal to the quantity that they want times the number of units of raw materials for the garment. Okay. Before I go on, I want to get us into the habit here of making some calculations. I actually passed through on the one that I wanted to show. I'm going to insert a column here, and we're going to have the contract value that's stated, and then we can do the contract value calculated. Okay. And actually, what I'm going to do is I have to exchange these two columns here. Simple enough. Get this out of the way for a second. Control exit out of there. Control V. So this was, I marked that wrong. It's dollars per garment. I had the and sign in there. Dollars per garment. And we're going to move the calculated contract value there. Why? Because I wanted to make that our first equation. It's going to be your quantity times the price per garment. And that's 7,200. So what we just did was we cross-checked. We could take some of the primitive information, and there's nothing funny going on here. So $4, and I'll format that column. And we can format these as well. When we make our first calculation here, that we have the contract value that we calculated and it matches up with the stated contract value, that gives us a good feeling that the primitives that we're using actually work without any kind of question, that there's no funny things going underneath the covers with this. All right. So now we calculated total raw material requirement here. and perhaps we'll put in, I'd like to put that in earlier. I'll put this in here as, try to be as accurate as possible with the cost of raw material per unit. That's the cost of a unit of raw material. And I'm going to make up a number here of 50 cents. Okay. So if we took the total cost raw material, will just be equal to the number we need to complete the job times the cost. And we're going to help ourselves out by formatting here. Sometimes there's a keyboard shortcut to do this. I'm not using all of them. I'm not sure if there's a quick way to reformat these into dollars or not, but you have to go through all the menu system to do that. Okay. Now, we've come to an important gateway here, because there's something we should understand is we're after the cost. So obviously the contract value minus our costs will give us the profit on the contract. That's equal. Okay, so the contract value minus all the costs is equal to the profit. That's what we're trying to determine, is what is the profitability of this. So the first thing we did was calculate the value of the contract, and now we can start subtracting some things out. But we're going to keep track of this a certain way. Okay, so I can calculate how much the raw materials cost, and there's another way to express that. I am going to put in here total instead of dollar percent. What's the contribution of the total cost from the raw materials, and that is going to just be a ratio of how much we had to spend on raw materials over the contract value, right? Okay, so we're calculating what percent of the contract value is raw materials, or are raw materials. So raw materials were 25%, and these are numbers that we are really driving at to understand what's going on. So I'm going to be easy on my eyes. I'm going to add in a little bit of color on that, and usually it's an intermediate calculation. So I'm going to go to, rather than one of the powerful colors around the outside, I usually pick a softer one on the interior here. So we're going to use a soft yellow just to say, okay, our eyes should align with this. Our eyes should look at this. Let's do the same for this one here, right? And these are big numbers that we want to remember. Now, here's a little Excel information that we want to keep. I want to be able to scroll around here, so I'm going to show you that you need to, under view, we need to freeze panes right where I have the active cell. So you click the active cell where you want to freeze pane. And when I do that, now our scrolling from side to side will at least keep wherever we had that set on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to reset it to here, because I want to keep track. I want to be able to see what the garment is. So I'm going to unfreeze and refreeze. Okay, so now I change. You can see, I don't know if you can tell in the video, but there's a crosshair here right across the page. There's a little bit of a darker line there, and a vertical line that's a little bit darker there. Okay, and now if we scroll around to the right, you can see that that's kept on the screen. Okay, that's really helpful, so you can at least line up the row number with what you have there. So the other, the other garments that we had here were something about sport shorts, and there was white socks. You can abbreviate them any way you want, except I didn't get it out of there. That better? I didn't quite get it. What else do we have to make? low-rise jeans, and Bermuda shorts. Low-rise jeans and Bermuda shorts. Okay, so those are the 5 that we are, so to speak, stuffed with. I use that term, okay, because whoever came before us committed to these things. We didn't have any decision in them. They ordered up these contracts, or they responded to these contracts and won them, and then they have some material on order. You're going to have to go in and look at whether the right amount of material is coming in and at what rate it is, whether it comes in right away or it's spread out over a number of payments. Okay. All right. So we're working through this, and we've made a couple of accomplishments. We've had an ability to calculate the contract value, and then we can look at the first level of costs. Okay. So we're in this section up here called major costs. What's the next thing that we should take a look at? If we come back to the floor, we kind of took care of raw materials. Let's take care of what goes on out here. And if we go into the production floor here, t-shirts take these very 4 machines that we started with. We didn't have to buy any machines to do this. But if we go to, again, back to the research desk and we look under products, under cotton, and we look at t-shirts, it tells us that it needs to cut, sew, press, pack. Okay, so we know that. There's some other information in here that's pretty valuable too. This is where you also find out that there's 2 cotton needed per unit, and it gives us a weight there that's going to be important for shipping. I'll remember that. That's a half a pound. All right. And there's a couple other sneaky numbers in here. One of them is the holding cost per unit is 25 cents. So remember that if you have them sitting on your shipping dock over a turn, you're going to get charged 25 cents per pound. Okay, so it goes by weight. Actually, the holding cost is by unit. Pardon me. Okay. So those are a few things that we have to remember here. All right. So now we're going to go back. I want to show you how to set this part of the Excel spreadsheet up, because we are going to have 7. Sometimes I leave a few columns available in case we have to add anything later on, and then later when I've got things working, I might eliminate them. But I'm going to get into an area of the major costs where we're looking at what the cycle costs are. And I'll go back over there and we'll see what's going on. Okay, so we have 7 processes, possible processes at all. Let's cut. And for t-shirts, we only need these 4 operations. The other ones are heat transfer. Okay, I'm going to grab this. I'm going to be easy on my eyes here. I'm going to come back up here to home, centerize that up, central. Now they're all centered. And usually for my own tastes, I pick a dark blue like that, turn it white, and I hit it with bold, and then they punch out of the dark background there. Might have to do that. Yeah, it's bold. Okay, so we got that. All right, so we have a little section here that we need to look at. For t-shirts, we do not do dye, embroider, or heat transfer. What I do that's kind on my eyes that you'll find to do the same is gray them out. We're not going to have to dye, embroider, or heat transfer on these t-shirts, but what we are going to have to do is go in and find out what the costs are for each of these operations. So how do you find that? We come back to the production floor here, and we'll click on the cutting, because that's the first operation. Then we go to sewing. There's our sewer, and then we have a packer, and then we have the pressing machine. Okay. So let's look at what the cycle costs are here. Okay, so for our cutter, we have cost per operation is 8 cents. Second operation is 20 cents for sewing. Packer is 20, and the presser is 15. Okay, so if we want to go in order, it's actually from cutting to sewing to pressing to packing, and we want to get those numbers. If you follow that, you might have to rewind a little bit to see what those numbers were here. But let's see, pressing's 15. So we want to get the numbers correct in order here. So this was 0.08 cents. Sewing was 20 cents in operation. Pressing was actually 15 cents, and packing was 20. All right, so let's go back there and just make sure we got those straight. Okay, pressing is 15. Packing is 20. Okay, just make sure you get those in order. There's the packing. Okay, all right. So now we have the cost for each of the machines per unit that we put through there. Now, how many units do we have? Well, if we go back here, we remember we have 1,800 units back under quantity, right? So what we'd like to do is, hey, let's just do an intermediate add here. Let's do, if I hit Alt equals, what does it do? Alt equals is the shortcut to this. I'm going to drag that out a little bit. Alt equals gives you the sum formula. That's a keyboard shortcut if you were going to do sums, which you do quite often. I hit enter and we come up with 63 cents. Now, what I'm going to do is format these to currency. Let's always be kind to our eyes. So you can see how much kind of maintenance work you're going to have to do on this, not only for yourself, but you want to leave this behind in a well-formatted way for the next people or whoever you're trying to train or bring on board here. Okay, so it's 63 cents. I'm going to put in $1 per unit. Okay, and I don't want that blue. It has a little habit of thinking ahead for me, which I don't want. I'm going to unfill that. Okay, so this is really going to be dollar unit cost. Dollar, try it again. It's in white. I have to go back and hit black. And that's the cycle costs there. So now we can put the contract cost. How do we get that? It's simply how much it costs per each unit times, and we're going to come back over here and multiply it by the quantity is 1,800. Boom. Okay, so it cost us $1,134 to run it across the factory floor, right? Where we've gotten to so far is we've figured out two costs. That's why I wanted to get this far. I'm going to drop this down and colorize it as yellow, the weak yellow that we have there. Okay, so we have weak yellow. So this was cost one of how many we have of question mark. How many costs do we really need to track? This is going to be cost two of how many we're going to track. Okay, and as we did the relative impact of raw materials on this contract, we're going to look at the relative impact in percentage of the cycle costs here. You can name these anything you would like to. Okay. Just shape it up for our eyes so the eyes look at this right. And what we're going to do is figure out what the percentage contribution of the cycle costs are to the contract value. So we're going to hit that as contract value. Okay. And we'll format that as percentages. Okay, so what we can see now is a quarter of the contract is going out in raw materials. Now, I had made up the cost of the materials here, and I'm going to tell you something that I can remember that the cotton, for cotton, the average cost of materials is 10 cents. Okay, I want to bring that down a little bit to make it reasonable. And as we did in class, it came out to 360 because that's the actual number. All right, so I just updated this. If you look at the cost of cotton, it ranges from 8 to 12 cents, and I use an average of 10 for this. Okay, and we can see that the raw materials for t-shirts is 5%, and the cost of the cycle is 15%. So it costs us 3 times as much money to run it across the production floor as it does in the material that goes into it. Okay, now we're thinking like business people. We're breaking this thing down. All right. Okay, and then what is the next cost? Oh, as I mentioned, I always leave at least one column between things till later on when I might need that column for something I forgot about or want to add in there. And so I'm just going to give myself a little room there. And we're going to do cost 3 of how many you want to track. And these are the ones that we went over in class. Okay. So we're going to look at shipping. Okay. So we're going to look at the contract shipping, how much it costs. And since we did that, we might as well know that coming up is we're going to look at the relative impact, what's its relative contribution to the costs. Okay, spread these out just a bit. I'm letting it auto format it to as wide as we need it. Okay, so how do we figure that out? Well, remember that we had a weight. We had a weight. We had a weight per garment, right? We put in, we did not put in a column for the weight of the final garment, right? Total garments. Okay, I'm going to add that in right here. And this is going to be unit weight. And that was half a pound. That's the number that I got confused there with. Weight, okay. And I'm just going to format that. So you have to be nice to yourself as you go along here. You're putting breadcrumbs down or you're preparing for the future. Put a number in here so that later on this is in a clean format. What I just did was just change that to a, and you can go back and rewind this anytime you want, but I just changed that to a 2-digit number, simple number here. So all the weights will come in per garment. Okay, so now we have to calculate shipping, and shipping is based on weight. And so we could do this all in one hit, but remember that I actually saved a cell here. Isn't it glad that we did that? So let's do the contract weight. And that's going to be unit weight times the total quantity. There's our unit weight times the total quantity is 1,800. So how much does this whole thing weigh? 900 pounds. Okay. And, you know, to be nice for everybody that's reading this besides me, Alt Enter. Let me try that again. Alt Enter. And I'm going to put that in LBS. Okay, so that's in pounds. That's the contract weight in pounds. And how do we do the shipping weight? So we fly back over to our shipping department, and when we click on the desk, we get the table. So let's say that we were just going to ship this nominally at 2 weeks. Probably with 7 weeks, we'll have just enough time to get this thing done. And at 2 weeks and at 900 pounds, that puts us way into freight. I mean, the minimum for freight is 250. We're at 900. That's well into the freight classification. And it says it costs us $175 plus 40 cents a pound. So we'll just put that in there. 175 plus paren 40 cents per pound times the total weight is equal to 535, and we're going to put that in dollars. So we go back over to currency, and we'll leave 2 digits for it. That might just clutter it up a little bit. We don't probably need the fractional dollars, the cents there, okay? And as we did with the other 3 costs that we've done so far, we're going to calculate that over the contract value. So come back to the contract value. Now remember, I painted that yellow. That's why, because I can fly back over here and grab it right away. I know that column's in yellow. So the things that you use a lot or you want to keep paying attention to. And so we're going to format all these as percentages with 2 decimal places. Sure, we'll go along with that. And it says that the shipping was 7.43%. Okay, so now we have 3 of the costs, both in hard dollars and in relative contribution to the total costs of that. Seems to me we probably want to add it up by now, right? Okay, so let's just say I'm going to take that and I'm going to squeeze it out of the way a little bit because that was just for reference. Remember, if you remember, what I had originally drawn was a few different sections, and I actually by accident pretty much grabbed about as much screen space as I needed. Okay, so this was for the profitability, figuring out what the costs were and the profitability. All right, so ahead of time I knew I was going to need quite a few columns there, and it came out just about right. Okay, so whenever you have these individual things, we probably want to add them up. And so what we can do is the dollar, let's say the contract, 3 costs. I'm going to put a 3 in there, 3 costs. And that's going to be hard dollars. That's why I put the dollar sign in there. Okay, so we're going to add up the shipping. Plus the processing, manufacturing. It's that number, plus the dollars it took for the raw material. Just added them together, enter, and we came up with $2,029. Okay, what are we going to do with that? Okay, so we're going to take that, drag it over here, and we're going to change that from dollars to percent because it's the companion calculation that we're going to do is add up. Actually, there's different things we could do. We could do a check on our other numbers, but let's just do the simple calculation here. So we're going to take this number and divide it by the contract value, which is over here. Again, that yellow column is why you go easy on your own eyes here, okay? And we're going to change that to percentages with 2 decimal places, okay? What does that tell us? That tells us that the costs eat away 28%. Just these 3 costs eat away 28% of the contract value, okay? And those are directly attributable to the product. So that would be under cost of goods sold, as would be labor. If you wanted to really calculate your gross profit, which is your contract value or revenue minus the costs that go directly into the product. Okay. One of the tests about that is if you pull the plug on any one of those inputs, if your output immediately drops to nothing or your processing goes to nothing, then that goes under your cost of goods sold. Okay. So it's kind of nice to know what the costs are here, but also why don't we talk about the entire margin? Okay. So we'll talk about the margin at this point. It really could be stated as costs of, this could be stated as your gross margin, but there are other costs, so I don't want to be misleading on that. So it's your dollar margin versus your percent margin on this, okay? And what does that mean? That's just equal to the contract value. If we want to know how much we're making on this, it's just your contract value minus the sum of the 3 costs so far, which is that. And so we're making 5,171 before we take some other costs out of there, okay? And the same thing is, let's look at the actual margin we're clearing on this, and we're just going to take 1 minus what the cost percentage of the costs were. Oh, let me try that again. I forgot the equal sign. Equals 1 minus percentage, okay? And we get almost 72% so far, okay? So you just think about those are very attributable costs to the actual pumping out of any particular unit of garment for the customer, okay? Now, what I would tend to do is take these and use my reserved bright gold for that, okay? So that's really eye-catching now. That's why I use the duller yellow over here, okay? So that gives us a sense of if we wanted to step into this further and add more costs out of there, obviously these numbers are going to change. So far, so good. Okay, let's see how my original estimate for how much space I needed on the screen so far is actually pretty neat. And I said, let's do a separator between profitability and schedule. There's schedule over there. So I just want to go over that. How do you do the schedule on this, right? What are the 3 contributions of time? What eat away at schedule time? So what I'm going to do is create a visual separator here by painting it some color, some rude, obnoxious color. That reminds me, let's find a rude, obnoxious color like that. Yeah, that's really obnoxious. Okay, so that's where I just know that there's a separation in my sheet because now we're going to get into schedule. Okay, so this is I'll put that up here. So now we're getting into schedule. Okay, so now we have schedule. What were the 3 things that went into the schedule? Okay, the first thing was going to be raw material lead time. Whoops, I did that wrong. I didn't use my Alt Enter. Okay, so Alt Enter. The raw material lead time, and that'll bother me if I don't fix that. Okay, so raw material lead time. Get it into the right place. Okay, so raw material lead time in general will be what? Well, 2 weeks, and we went over that in class. You can figure out where that comes from. That's pretty nominal if you just want to come up with a nominal estimate of cost and of schedule here. So we'll add two weeks for the raw material lead time. And this is why I wanted to get into this a little bit, because you're going to have to do something very similar to what we have here. So I'm just going to come right back in here and copy it, because there's a cycle time as well as a cycle cost for everything. I have to take another look and make sure I get it into the right place. Yeah, and so we'll just drop it in here. I usually give myself a column or two, and actually delete all these, because now we're going to format these as simple numbers, not dollars. Now, these numbers will represent time, but it's going to be in numbers of seconds, so we don't need any decimal places on it. Okay, so they'll just be whole numbers there. Okay, now just borrow from the experience of running out the costs for the cycle costs here. Borrow from that experience that you're going to run out the totals, the subtotal and the total time it's going to take for the entire contract. Okay, and so you're going to get, I'm going to speed through this part because it kind of matches a little bit what we've already done. This is going to be the total unit time, right? And that's going to be in some huge amount of seconds. It's going to be something like 100,000 seconds. You can actually fill these numbers in. You're going to actually do the math. Pardon me. It will not be in 100,000 seconds. The total unit time will be in something around the order of 500 seconds. My bad. Okay, so it's 500. Let's call it 500 seconds to do every shirt. That's kind of a high estimate, but conservative. All right, so it's about 500 seconds. What are you going to do? You need to convert that to hours. And how do you do that? You divide by 3,600. That's 60 seconds, 60 minutes in an hour, right? 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. So you take the number of seconds, divide by 3,600, and that will give you the number of minutes it takes. Oh, redo. Okay. Once you have the total units of time that it's going to take, let me just expand that a little bit so we can read what it says. Total units of time. I want to clear that out. I don't want to continue that blue any further, because I want to use the blue as the marker for where my machines are to put in the unit cycle time, the cycle times that are involved with this. So this is going to be unit. Oh, it's in there. It's just in white. That's all. Change that back. So this is going to be unit cycle time for every garment that goes through there, right? And then you're going to have to get the total contract time, which would just be your quantity, which is 1,800 for t-shirts, times 1,800 times the time it takes for each one, 500 seconds. And I'm going to do a really fast one here. I don't want to spend any more time than I need to. 1,800 units times 500 seconds. I'm going to give you the sense of how much of these seconds. It's going to take 900,000 seconds. All right. So what I recommend is convert it to hours. How many hours in 900,000 seconds, right? Alt enter. And what you do is you just divide by 60 times 60, which is 3,600. Okay. So you can get your number of hours there. And then you're going to want to figure out the days by taking how many hours it takes. Alt enter to give me that, and divide by 8 hours per day. Okay, so I'll tell you how many days it's going to take. And then you're going to want to calculate weeks, which Alt enter is to divide the number of days. Let me think about that. This is the number of hours. Divide by 8 is going to give you the number of days. And then divide by 5 will give you the number of weeks. So there's 5 days in a week. Okay, so I know you want me to do this. So it's going to be equal to 900,000 divided by 3,600. That's 250 hours. 250 divided by 8 is 31.25 days. How many weeks is that? Is going to equal days divided by 5 days per week, and you get 6.25 weeks. Now, how much time? Let's put that in some yeller. Okay, so that is actually going to be a final calculation that I'm going to reserve my best gold for. Okay, so this is a power column here. This is going to take 6.25 weeks. How much time do we have to take to do this in? We have 7 weeks. Okay, all right. Now, that's saying that we have to spend almost the entire delivery time only on the production floor. That doesn't include 2 more weeks here. Or how long does it take for shipping? Okay, so for shipping, usually I would put in here nominally, if you've scheduled well, it'll take 2 weeks. I'll put 2 in there. I don't want to put 2 in there, and we're going to put that Alt Enter. It's in weeks. We'll do it like this. Shipping weeks. Okay, that's in weeks. All right. So how long does it really take? What's the total? I'll leave that to you. I'm not going to give it to you. There's 3 numbers there. You can add them up. Okay. Now that's the mystery. Okay. So we have 6.25 weeks on the production floor. Plus 2 is 8.25. Plus 2 is 10.25. 10.25 weeks. You should be very interested in understanding why, when we're given 7 weeks to get it done, we actually can come in under schedule. Okay, and you need to read the student manual, and you need to get into the system, and there's a screen or two that will give you the answer. This is the big mystery that I mentioned in the course, in the class, that someone needs to figure out, or all of you need to figure out, what is different about what's being told or expressed in the manual to what is actually going on in the real world of simulation there, and why, when we have 10.25 weeks, do we actually get that done? That's sort of a spoiler there, but something's happening in here, and you can almost start figuring out a little bit of what's going on, where it's happening, that doesn't go exactly by the book. And that's the big mystery, as we're dropping you into this factory, and you need to figure out, the manual you got was all that you had as far as information goes, and there needs to be something added in the manual. That's what I'm getting at this. There's something missing from the manual you need to explain. Why does it come out less than 10.25 weeks? So with that mystery, I will leave it at that and post this and send it out. And hopefully that'll help you through Super Bowl Sunday tonight and have things done for tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Have a great weekend.